Coming out this week on Beyond the Gear, I'm joined by Jack Broadbent.
My slide of choice being my hip flask, so I needed something that I was going to just strictly use for slide. My most interesting guitar really here is the guitar that I sort of generally now write all my songs on. This I picked up in the USA. This is actually a 1948 Gibson LG-2. This guitar was actually hanging on the wall in my house from me being a little boy. It was probably one of the first guitars I ever played, and it's a Gibson Melody Maker. I was having to compromise my sound completely by basically dialing back the distortion, like all the gains. So, and that's a big part of what I like about this sound is, when it goes from clean and just bleeds into distortion. So really, that pedal's a godsend.
So I'm here with Jack Broadbent for Beyond the Gear, our first Beyond the Gear that is entirely online as well, with you being in Canada. So it's a first. So of course, getting straight into things. Do you want to show us your gigging, your kind of main gigging guitar there?
Absolutely. Let's get into that. So I've been pretty much exclusively using these Hofners for about the last 7 years. I just love them. They're 1965, this one and this one here. They're really dynamic. They've got single coil pickups on them, and I just find that they can take quite a lot of abuse, and at the same time they've just got bags and bags of tone. So I've been using this one for slide guitar, which was kind of very much a decision that had to be made because of how hard I've been hitting strings and the frets. My slide of choice being my hip flask, so I needed something that I was going to just strictly use for slide, so I chose this guitar. This is a Hofner Senator, and it's actually got a Framus pickup on it, and Framus were a company that kind of branched off Hofner. So you find a lot of their bits on the older Hofner models. But I'm going through a Roland Street Cube, which was one of my busking amplifiers back in the day, and I just continued using it. I love the simplicity of the amp, and I love the sound. So I've set that with quite a lot of reverb and quite a bit of gain. And the desired effects a little like this.
So, of course, many people will have probably already asked you this question, but for those that don't know, what is the kind of idea behind the whole whiskey flask thing?
Well, I was playing on the street. I was busking, and I used to use, like my lighter or, just things like that, random objects. And then one day I just realised I had the perfect tool just sat in my inside pocket the whole time. I particularly liked it because if you use, so let's look at the difference. So there's your standard bottleneck.
Yeah.
And obviously you're going to get a very definite and clean tone from this because it's quite pristine. Now, over the years after using this, I don't know if you can see that, but it's become very jagged. Yeah. So, I mean, you can almost use this as a sort of a violin bow. And when you dig in, it sort of creates this natural distortion. Now, if I were to record something a little softer or try to do something a little prettier or maybe of more of a country lilt, I generally use a bottleneck, so you'd get a... which obviously gives a slightly more, a sweeter attack. Now, I don't like being too sweet, so I kind of opted for the. Which I think is more suggestive, almost in some ways, of a harmonica sound, like a little Walter sort of harp sound. And certainly, I don't use any pedals, so for me, that's kind of that's my effects processor, really.
Yeah. I mean, you can tell just from over here, it's got that. It has a heavier kind of a more of an oomph to it than when you
and also with approaching something with a pinched finger like this, you get it's very sort of it's very calculated. Whereas as soon as you put something in the wrist instead, where you go, it becomes this more. It's all in the whole arm, you know, rather than it being sort of more dexterous. So, I mean, I think a healthy dose of the two is a nice arsenal to have in terms of slide guitar. You know, people like using glass and things like that too. I find generally with a nice stainless steel bottleneck and with my trusty flask, I pretty much get the whole range of what I need. You know.
Is there, I mean, again, this might be a very obvious question to you, but is there a certain like decision behind you having it just sat on your lap like that?
Well, when I first approached it, I was given a bottleneck and I tried it on, say, my fourth finger, and I just found trying to do things like, you know. Now, I'm sure to someone who does that all the time, it's a nice, easy move. But for me personally, as soon as I laid it down, I just found that the thing suddenly behaved more like percussion, and I like playing percussion. So
yeah.
The other thing being, if you're playing like this, for the observer, it's great. They can see exactly what you're doing. But for the player, you're kind of peering around the corner at what you're doing. The second you lay it down like that, it becomes a piano, you know. Everything's laid out, the octaves are clear, you know. I just found that it was something new and interesting, and sort of took me out of playing in my normal style, you know, took me out of normal habits.
Yes, I was going to say, because it's an unconventional kind of approach there. I don't see many slide players in particular play like that.
Well, I mean, there's people, you know, you get lap steels and you get pedal steels, but the decision to play just a standard guitar this way was really just built on that necessity. And then obviously if you're out busking on the street, people are always going to walk past and go like, oh, what's he doing?
Yeah. There's a method.
So it kind of grew. Yeah, it sort of grew out of that. But really, I think it's a very different approach to the other slide playing. I think you can get some very different results from it. You know?
Of course, you mentioned before we hit the record there that you had you did have a pedal, didn't you?
I do have a pedal. Yes. Yeah, I have a pedal. Yeah. And, essentially, its job is to essentially kind of do nothing really. But the problem with using some of these guitars with the single coil pickups, particularly if you're playing solo shows, is you can tend to get a lot of interference or a lot of buzz if if they've got old lighting systems or if there's, you know, big transformers under the stage, and, you know, old buildings buzz like hell, basically. Now, the best pedal I've found to combat that, particularly considering, for example, with that guitar, facing the pickup upwards straight towards those lights as well, so the interference is even stronger. I tried a couple of different pedals, but the best one I've come across is the Electro Harmonics Hum Debugger. And every gig I play, I plug it in, I show the guy, we turn it up, he goes, you hit that one button, bang, everything's gone. Doesn't affect your tone, doesn't affect it doesn't gate the instrument. I would have shown you in here, but fortunately for me, I don't get buzz in this room, so you wouldn't have been able to tell. But yeah, they're relatively cheap. They're about $100, I think. Look out for the green box, green look. Most sound engineers at gigs, if they've not seen one before, they buy 3 of them as soon as I've left, and they all assume that I work for Electro Harmonics. They're that big.
I mean, that's great, isn't it? Because it essentially means that you can take what you've got now and just put it anywhere. Like, it doesn't matter what venue, doesn't matter where you go.
Well, what was happening was I was having to compromise my sound completely by basically dialing back the distortion, like all the gain. So, and that's a big part of what I like about this sound is, when it goes from clean and just bleeds into distortion. So really, that pedal's a godsend for any player who uses a single coil pickup.
Moving on. I do see that you do have another. Yeah, I'm trying to get your side.
So that was Marilyn. That was Marilyn because she's a blonde bombshell.
Of course.
Next we've got Jim Hofner over here. Because I knew a farmer growing up whose name was Jim Hoff, so I had to. This is the first one I got. I got this one in Australia, actually. A guy gave it to me as a gift, and this guitar is basically the sister or brother of this one, and I use this one for all my regular playing. And it's still got a nice bit of power behind it. It's still got some nice crunch with that old single coil pickup on it. And again, it's exactly the same year. It's 1965. And when I got it, it didn't have the pickup on it. It had sunken F holes on both sides where the bracing had disappeared. So I actually put some sound posts in to hold it upright better. And I took it to a luthier in the UK and saying that I wanted to basically emulate this guitar to be able to amplify this one. And it's a great story. He went to his little pot of pickups and cables and all this stuff, and he pulled out a little box no bigger than that, and he took one pickup out, and then he went, what year was your guitar? I said, I think 65. He said, I think that's about right. And that's a 1965 Hofner pickup that just happened to be just down the road at my friend's place. So he stuck it on here, he drilled one hole, and he put that one little pot just for volume. There's no tone on it, and one place to plug in. And it plays like a dream every time. The tone seems to be well balanced, so we never bothered with a tone pot. Before he connected everything up, he just slipped the pickup underneath there with the cables coming out, and he said, just touch the strings, and and we both looked at each other and went, I think that'll probably be all right.
That's great, man. Regarding your strings, do you go for the same set no matter which guitar you look for, or do we go with different?
Well, I have an endorsement deal with D'Addario strings, and I've always used D'Addario, even prior to the endorsement. So I was chuffed to bits to get it. I used the 13 set phosphor bronze on the slide guitar, just because I'm hitting it so hard, I feel like it gives it a little more stability. So they're 13s to 56, and I use 12s on the regular guitar just so I can get a bit more bend out of it. But yeah, traditionally I use very heavy strings. As that's also because I'm using quite heavy drop tunings a lot of the time too, and I find that thicker strings are able to hold the tuning better on those. It's not uncommon for me to drop my standard guitar down to drop C tuning, so that can be, I find, can be a little problematic with thinner strings, because you hit it, it'll bend off a semitone before it'll land gracefully on the note you're trying to hit. So I just find with the heavier strings, you got a little bit more control.
Interesting. So the next one, I see a little one in the corner here.
There's over here. I've got one. So really now I'm just going to show you a couple of a little of my favorite guitars that I've kind of acquired over the years. Now, one of which being from my father. I think 1965 must have been a sweet spot for guitars, because, like I said, both my Hofners are. And this guitar was actually hanging on the wall in my house from me being a little boy. It was probably one of the first guitars I ever played, and it's a Gibson Melody Maker. Now, they, again, one single club pickup. This does have a tone control and one volume control. And it's very snappy. It's got a lot of bite to it. They made this and then discontinued them just before they made the SG. So you imagine it's sort of in that wheelhouse. So yeah, it's great for rock and roll. If you like the sound, you'll love this guitar. If you can't get on with it, there's pretty much nothing else you can do with it. It does kind of jazz up a little bit if you knock the tone off it, but really this guitar is for... So yeah, my dad got this in a second-hand guitar shop in about 1979 or something like that in the States. It's since travelled all the way back to the UK, only for me to fall in love with it and bring it back to North America. So it's done a bit of travelling, this guitar. But for anybody who wants that kind of pretty bitey rock and roll sound straight off the bat, I think it's a great choice.
I was going to say, it's like ready-made for that kind of style, isn't it? You don't have to do a lot.
Well, I mean, I've seen people use them for slide guitar as well. And obviously, I mean, if you've got a decent pedal rig and setup, I mean, you can make them sound a lot of different ways. All I'm saying is, for me personally, as a kind of a bit of a purist when it comes to not using too many effects, I find that if you're looking for that kind of like blistering garage blues, garage rock sort of sound, they're just fantastic. They weigh nothing as well. I think they look great, and you can really throw them around on stage, I
was about to say then, it looks, much more mobile than perhaps the other two that you have.
Yeah, exactly. But also, I love the sort of softness of it's got that double cutaway thing, but unlike the SG, it's a little softer. And I just think it's very sweet. So yeah, that's a gift from my dad, which brings me to, well, perhaps probably my most interesting guitar really here is the guitar that I sort of generally now write all my songs on, and this I picked up in the USA. This is actually a 1948 Gibson LG-2, and there's no pickups on this, so it's just one to sit and play in the house, But I generally use this one for obviously more acoustic stuff, but it's a great one for writing on, I'm always intrigued by a guitar at this age, just of who's played it, how many hands it's been through, and it's in great condition. But this is my pride and joy for writing on it. It doesn't leave the house, this one.
I was just about to say, is this the one that remains at home?
Yeah. But unless it's going to the studio, because with a guitar like this, the guy that restored it and gave it to me at a very, very beautiful price, because we're friends and he likes my music. I said to him, so if I were to install a pickup on that, he said, you put a pickup on that guitar. I won't.
Yeah.
It's 1948, Wow. But really, all you've got to do with this guitar is either put one mic in front of it, or even if you're using a decent condenser mic for your vocal, this thing's so proud it'll just rise up just behind the voice, and it's great for acoustic stuff.
I was about to say there, it's got this kind of real kind of, in non-guitarist term, like a warm tone to it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I mean, half of the rock and roll stuff off the new record was all written on this guitar, because you can play this guitar at 1 o'clock in the morning, and obviously you don't have to turn it up too loud, and it's got all that vibe to it anyway. So I don't play slide on it because I don't want to damage the frets. But yeah, this one remains nowadays to be my sort of my secret pride and joy that no one really knows about. So it's actually nice to have an opportunity to show her up a little bit. So.
Yeah, man.
And I call this one Grace. I got it in Havre de Grace in Maryland. So this is Grace.
Do we have any other bits and bobs left?
I think we're about there, really. I mean, in terms of live equipment, I mean, I use a Shure SM58 for on stage. Yeah. I just like the proximity of that particular one. I generally go for Corona Extra because it's a nice light beer and it's not too strong. So you can have a few of them.
That's great, man. I've noticed a lot of people go with Shures now. For those that are kind of, starting out with, music or whatever. What do you like? What's the attraction to those kind of mics in particular? Are they just a go-to?
For me personally, I mean, I've been using an SM58 since I was about 14, 15. I just like you have to kind of get on them to get a lot of sound out of them. So you end up with this proximity thing whereby if you get back too far off them, they've got sort of limited field. So you're not going to pick up as much from your guitar amps and stuff like that. And it just feels like a nice proximity for me, for a singer that wants to kind of have more intimate, I find them very dynamic. And they're pretty robust. I mean, you can, everyone's seen an SM58 that's just dimpled as hell on the top there, so.
Hard wearing. That seems to be the common trait. Everything's hard wearing here.
Everything I've got's hard wearing. And just to give you one last little closer up sort of look at this then. So with regards to my amp.
And this is the only amp that you'll bring with you? Like exactly the same as from back in the day? And I've had this amp probably for about 15 years. And it runs off 6 AA batteries. I never use the plug for it. Wow. I feel like I might be saving the planet, but I don't know. I'm using quite a lot of batteries. But yeah, it's basically kind of like a bit like a Line 6 sort of setup. So you've got your amp emulators here, going from very clean to sounding pretty raucous here. I like to set it around the middle or about here, and then pretty equal measure on the volume and gain. Shitload of reverb, and often I'll boost the treble a little bit because my single coil pickups are sometimes a little more muddy than bright, So I mean, it kind of shows here that if you if you're just starting out, you don't really need, you see with bands these days or artists, they see these big walls of like Marshall amps or, a huge amount of gear, which I think puts off a lot of people sometimes.
That's it. And I think for players starting out, strings are expensive. And people fascinate about strings as much as anything else. Just getting all your cabling and everything together can cost, can be quite pricey. But the irony being, as soon as you sort of start doing well, people go, "Oh, do you want some strings?" Or "Here, use my stuff," and you don't need it then, because usually, maybe made a bit of money or something. But all this really seems to prove is that I think it's more about getting your sound. And somebody said to me years and years ago, a friend said, it doesn't matter really what combination of amplifier and guitar you use, you'll always get your sound. And I really like that, because, if you do find an amp that's a little bit more heavy or bassy, you're just going to knock it down till you get what you want. If you've got, the pedals that you choose to use are only going to be to search for a sound you probably got on a different setup sometime, So for me personally, I'm of the school of thought of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I've always done well with this setup. So for me, I worry what's going to happen if anything were to happen to any of these instruments or my amplifier. But, like I said, I'd probably be able to get the same sound using a combination of different things. But yeah, I think it's that's part of the fun, really, is sort of getting your sound together, getting your rig together.
I was going to say, you've got obviously your own signature sound. And, there'll be some kind of young guys out there that'll be like, well, how do I get that sound? But it's like, that's kind of...
You'll have to come and nick my gear.
Yeah, well, there's that. But there's, I don't think anybody can completely replicate it, as you just said there, because it's your thing,
Well, that's
like
it.
Way.
That's it. I've given most guitarists want to play this guitar because of the sound they get out of it. Now, if you try and play that guitar without a bottleneck, because of the amount of damage to the frets, each fret's pretty much, lacerated across it. Yeah. So the notion of playing it. The notion of playing it straight like that nowadays is pretty much redundant because of the height of the action and stuff, stuff like that. So, yeah, unless you approach the instrument in the same way, then yeah, you're going to get very different results. I'm sure if you tried to play, I think it's Neil Young's Black Telecaster, Black Les Paul, sorry. Apparently, no one but Neil can play that thing because it's so. He has to compensate so much because it goes out of tune as you're fretting, that only he can really kind of keep it together just because he's used to it,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm sure we'd all love to have a go on it, but, most people I give that guitar to, they play a lick on it and they go, whoa.
Yeah, and they hand it back. So it becomes kind of part of you, I think. That's the big thing I've noticed with everybody's setups and guitars. Over the years, they develop these kind of what some people would class as faults, but that adds to the character of maybe your sound or the approach that you take.
Yeah, that's it. And it sort of creeps into your technique. I think you're right. It's sort of some of the failings or some of the little quirks of certain instruments can certainly stick you on a whole different path.
It's just like what you said there with Neil Young's guitar. It's like he's literally having to compensate, but it's that's part of his thing, isn't it?
And if you think about And if you think about experimentation early on with feedback, you know, I'm sure for a lot of guitarists when they first started using this, you know, these single coils with big amps and stuff, and they were getting loads of feedback, I'm sure they were biting their fingernails going, oh, what are we going to do? And now look at the role of feedback in rock and roll. Look at what Jimi Hendrix was able to do with it.
Yeah.
Look what once you've got a problem that you can control, then it's more about how can we use it to advantage rather than we've managed to get rid of it, you know. So all those wonderful pedals that they started experimenting with in the 60s and 70s to be able to do, you know, weird and wonderful things with distortion and with this, you know, with feedback, wouldn't have happened without there being, you know, the problem in the first place. It's kind of what is it? Invention or something is the source of invention. You know,
there's something in there, yeah.
Imperfection being the cause of invention, you know, or necessity being the cause of invention.
Yes. The thing for me that I take from those kind of things is I remember there was a music teacher that I used to go to school with, and he used to always say, if you put, it goes back to the Jimi Hendrix thing, if you put your thumb over here, you're playing it wrong. And it's like, there's a certain way, and it's like, well, you know, it obviously works for Jimmy, but you know, the thing is that like some of these things, even though it's technically wrong, that's what adds to your sound and your character. It's like there isn't really any rules, is there?
And it's interesting you say that, because I briefly had a guitar lesson or two at a college I went to, which I didn't stay at very long. And one of the reasons why was because when we got in the first sort of group guitar lesson, they said, okay, everyone get your pick out. And I said, I don't use one, you know. And it was like, somebody give Jack a pick. And I said, no, I use my fingers, thanks. Yeah. And that was already deemed as wrong. Now, in fact, so the final part of my gear rundown is, you know, I only use my thumb and index finger. A lot of people do some fantastic stuff, claw picking and all this, but I just developed it with these two. So the only problem being with how hard I play, you know, you smash them up quite a bit. But again, that was almost sort of beaten out of me, and I think you got to be really careful what you compromise if it's something that you're doing naturally, you know. Like my father plays bass guitar left-handed upside down, because when he first started playing, you couldn't get a left-handed guitar very easily, so he just turned it that way. Now he can do certain things that we can't because of the shapes available to him, because he's coming down from the top strings, you know. So there's certain things to gain from an unconventional approach.
When you said, obviously you mentioned there with your fingers, when you started kind of, did you kind of teach yourself guitar?
Oh, completely, yeah.
Yeah. So how did that kind of, you know, day one, how did that kind of happen? Like there's a lot of people that go, well, how do I even start?
Well, I guess it was, I just wanted to write songs. So it was kind of like, Dad, show us a chord. Yeah. You know, so I mean, but beyond that, you know, he showed me E minor. I ran upstairs to my bedroom and sat playing E minor and D for, you know, 2 days, wrote as many songs as I could out of that, and then went downstairs going, right, Dad, I need more chords. But it wasn't really, it was really just getting the knowledge of the how to play the chords, and then all the rhythm stuff and all that I was already hearing in my head anyway. I knew what kind of songs I wanted to write or wanted to, and then it was more a case of if I wanted to write something jazzy, then I had to learn what the right hand felt like for more jazzy stuff. All the chord stuff's kind of the same, you know, and I just used to I'd learn one chord, one shape, and I would be able to play it for 2 days because I'd move it around everywhere. Now I know I've got a shape. I'd just move it everywhere on the fret, start inventing my own chords using that structure. Usually those structures sit nicely together because they're the same intervals, until you get bored of it, and then you get a new chord. And then you do the same thing. And that's sort of how I got familiar with the fretboard, was really just taking simple chords, first position chords, moving them around until I wasn't playing any first position chords anymore.
Is there a certain method on starting off with slide? Because it's a different way of playing.
Yeah,
obviously.
Well, with slide guitar, and this is something that I think a lot of people, if they don't know this, then they'll be immediately frustrated, is slide guitar is traditionally played in an open tuning. So instead of playing, E, A, D, G, B, E, which is still hard for me to remember now because I barely ever use it, you play in open D or open G, and in that sense, you've got a full chord when you play. So for things like blues, it becomes very simple until you want to complicate it. Just as an example, your first open strings being your D chord, up to the fifth being the 4, and the seventh being the fifth turnaround chord. So so that's how you play it if you want to play simple. If you want to start, you start adding. But all it really is and it's however much you want to. I think your style depends on really how much you want to upset that apple cart, keep it straight, or start to light a bit of a fire underneath it. And that's the fun of playing the blues for me, has always been, I don't play many big solos and stuff, but I like to try and put some nice complexities into a simple groove.
It's very interesting, man. Well, thank you very much for going through everything with you. And hopefully we'll see you soon. I mean, you do, yes. by the time this is released, you'll have a talk.
I've got all new guitars, and I'll be playing.
Everything will be completely different.
Yeah.
So
by the time this is released, I believe I'm coming to the UK anyway in June.
Yeah. So
there's a run of dates happening. I think we previously discussed it in the last interview. There's definitely one confirmed for the 100 Club. There's the Black Deer Festival. So there's London, there's that. And if you keep an eye on my website and stuff, there's a load of dates that I just I can't fully confirm yet, but keep your eyes peeled.
Yeah, exactly. So obviously, if you haven't seen Jack, there's your opportunity, because it'll be like a few weeks until he does come out by the time this comes out. So get out there and check him out. Thank you very much, Jack. And
absolutely. And thank you so much. And thanks to everyone for tuning in. And
yes.
Good luck getting your rigs together.
Yes.